How does someone keep their eyes locked on an SUV for 2.5 hours while still writing a statement for the police? Both Pam Sturm and her daughter claim to have done just that. That's talent. Hey everyone, Christine Worth here. Welcome back to Beach House 34's deep dive into the Stephen Avery trial. If you're new or you just need like a quick refresher, last episode we dug into the testimony of Pam Sturm. This was Teresa Halbach's cousin, who just so happened within 30 minutes to find Teresa's RAV4 in that massive Avery salvage yard. You know, the 4,000 cars that were there. It seems absolutely miraculous, doesn't it? We talked about her search, how she got a map and a camera and the sheriff's direct line. And she got all of this information from none other than the ex-boyfriend, Ryan Hilligus. And if you remember, we talked about him, or his testimony was in episode 8. Now, in today's episode, Pam's daughter, Nikole Sturm, is on the stand, and we're going to hear her side of what went down that morning when they found Teresa's car, how they found it, what she saw, what she did. So this ought to be kind of interesting. I'm kind of wondering how, the two stories match up or if they don't. Right now, I'm deep into the full series of trial readings. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to hit pause on the weekly episodes while I focus on getting these trial readings finished. If you want to dive into past episodes, some of which you might have missed, I have a whole playlist on YouTube for that, all true crime. I'll have the link in the show notes for you. And just a quick heads up, if you like what you hear and want to toss me, say, a one-time tip as a way to say thanks, head to ko-fi.com/beachhouse34. There's no strings, no pressure, no subscriptions. It's like tossing a couple of bucks in the jar for the work that's put into these episodes. If not, no worries. I'm just glad that you're here. Before we get into the trial, because this is really, really important, and I understand that a lot of people might be confused when they hear the different Manitowoc County and Calumet County, because these are both around the same area, but you might wonder why this is brought up so often, and you'll hear it a lot in this transcript. And in further transcripts. But way back in episode 1, I had talked about how, so Stephen Avery, as you know, if you watch the Making a Murderer on Netflix, you know that he served 18 years for a sexual assault that he did not commit. DNA cleared him. It was a huge story, but what made it even bigger was the fact that he was suing Manitowoc County, the sheriff's department, the DA's office, and everybody involved for $36 million. He was pretty much saying, hey, you all destroyed my life. You're going to pay for this. So when Teresa went missing in 2005, Stephen Avery, he was right in the middle of this lawsuit against Manitowoc County. Stephen Avery, he's right in the middle of this lawsuit. And he was deposed for it before her murder. So there's a conflict of interest, right? The very same sheriff's office that he was suing was now going to be investigating him for a murder charge, right? If he's convicted of this murder, the lawsuit disappears. So Manitowoc County, same county he's suing, were specifically told not to be involved. When Teresa's car was found on the Avery property, this investigation was supposed to be handled by Calumet County. And Manitowoc was only supposed to be there to assist if absolutely necessary. This was essentially this very protective measure to avoid exactly what ends up happening throughout the whole trial. So when you hear people hammering on why was Manitowoc there, that's why. So that's why they keep bringing up this whole, was it Manitowoc County? Was it Calumet County? Who was there? All right, with all that said, let's get back into the courtroom And let's listen to what Nikole Sturm has to say. Now, this is the following day. They're starting a brand new date today. So here we go. The proceedings begin approximately 9 o'clock in the morning, and the clerk says, all rise. And then the court says, you may be seated. At this time, the court once again calls the state of Wisconsin versus Stephen Avery, case 05 CF 381. Would the parties state their appearances for the record? Mr. Kratz, he's the prosecutor, says, is this sound system not on? And the court says, nope, it's not on at all. Mr. Kratz says no, and the court says, okay, it's on now. Terrific. Mr. Kratz, appearances for the state? And Mr. Kratz says, Your Honor, the state appears by Calumet County District Attorney Ken Kratz, appearing as special prosecutor. Also appearing in this case is Mr. Fallon, Assistant Attorney General, and Mr. Gahn, Assistant District Attorney from Milwaukee County. Mr. Buting then says, good morning, Your Honor. Attorney Jerome Buting and Attorney Dean Strang appearing with Mr. Avery, who is present. And the court says, all right, Mr. Kratz, are you going to call your next witness? And Mr. Kratz says, sorry. And Mr. Kratz says, I don't know if this is working, Judge. And the court says, does that help at all? Check the plug under the desk. At which time the sound system started working after the electric cord for the microphone was plugged into a different outlet under the district attorney's table. Mr. Kratz then continues, that is probably going to be a little loud, but the state calls Nikole Sturm, judge. And then the clerk says, if you would raise your right hand, and Nikole Sturm is then sworn in, spells her last name, and then the direct examination is begun by Mr. Kratz. Good morning, Ms. Sturm. Thank you for coming this morning. Let me first ask you if you know a woman by the name of Pam Sturm. Yes. Who is Pam? She is my mother. And were you with Pam on the morning hours of November 5th of 2005? Yes, I was. Would you tell the jury where you went that morning, please? We first went to Teresa's house to enter the search to become volunteers for the search. All right. Thereafter, Ms. Sturm, did you accompany your mother to a property which is known as the Avery Auto Salvage Yard? Yes, I did. And after arriving at that scene, we understand from your mother that you and she, that is, received permission to search for the vehicle on that property. Is that correct? Yes, we received permission from Earl Avery. Tell the jury, as best you can remember, what efforts you made to search for Teresa's car that morning. We started out heading toward the south of the auto salvage yard. We went through looking inside vehicles, looking for anything that we could distinguish, anything to do with Teresa, whether it be Teresa herself or any articles that would be as to her. Sometime just before 10:30 that morning, I understand you found something. Is that right? Yes, my mom indicated that she found a RAV4 Toyota vehicle that didn't exactly match the description on the search form that we had, but looked very similar and was distinguishing because it was covered up with auto salvage materials as well as branches. So she definitely called me over and I went running. All right. When you ran toward your mother's location, can you tell the jury what you saw, please? I saw a bluish-green RAV4 with salvage parts up against it and branches over the top, and on other areas, definitely a vehicle that looked like someone was trying to hide. Now, there is an exhibit which has been marked in this case and received as exhibit number 31. I direct your attention to the large screen here to your right and ask if that, in fact, is the vehicle that you saw that morning. Yes, that is the vehicle. Now, your mother explained, and then Mr. Buting, the defense attorney, says, objection, counsel is leading the witness by saying, your mother did this, your mother did that. She should be asked open-ended questions and let the witness explain what she saw and what she did. And the court says, I will sustain the objection to the form of the question. Mr. Kratz says, that's fine, Judge. And then Mr. Kratz continues. Ms. Sturm, who took the photographs of these vehicles? I took the photographs. And other than taking the photographs, Can you tell the jury what else you did around that vehicle? With a tissue, I checked all four doors to see if any of the doors were open. They were all locked. So none of the four doors were open. I also used my cell phone to call the sheriff's office. Can you describe this tissue a little bit better? Sure. Because it was a cold November day, I brought tons of tissues with me because my nose was running and whatnot. I had clean tissues within my pockets. My mom stated, please use, I don't want to disturb anything, so please use your shirt sleeve or whatever you have to avoid touching the vehicle. I thought I better that I had clean tissues in my pocket, so I used that. I did check all four doors to see if anything was open. They were all locked. Miss Sturm, you did have occasion to look inside of this, correct? Yes, I did look in at every angle and saw a wild cherry Pepsi in the front and a bottle of Aquafina, but I didn't see Teresa or anything that I could identify that it was definitely Teresa's vehicle at that point. Could you describe the lighting conditions inside of the vehicle, please? Well, the area that the vehicle is in, you can see that there are trees and whatnot. It was a rather cloudy day. It was definitely dark. You couldn't visibly see. We did not have flashlights to be able to intricately look at details within the vehicle. Did you check for a vehicle identification number? Yes, I did look. I didn't know exactly where they were located, so it did take a little while to locate the VIN number, but we did find the VIN number on the driver's side near the windshield. It was a black interior and a black dashboard. But also the metal that the VIN number was on was black metal as well. It was a little difficult to actually read the VIN number, as well as the fact that I am a little bit short. So I had to try to reach over the top of the vehicle to read the VIN number without touching the vehicle or actually touching or rubbing up against the vehicle. After the telephone call was made to law enforcement authorities, where did you go? I stayed right near my mom, right near the vehicle. And after law enforcement was contacted, we moved a little bit away from this vehicle, but we kept our eyes on the vehicle at all times, just to make sure that no one else was coming. We didn't want to draw attention to ourselves in case someone would come after us, because we did find the vehicle. Was there any fixed object or any place that you were standing while you waited for law enforcement to arrive? We were near a car crusher, the machinery that crushes cars in the salvage yard. While you were waiting for law enforcement, did any individuals approach that vehicle? No, no one was near the vehicle. How long was it before law enforcement arrived, if you can remember? I would say approximately 20 minutes at the most. After law enforcement's arrival, can you tell us what you did, please? When law enforcement arrived, we pointed to where the vehicle was, and we stayed on the scene to be able to give statements. When law enforcement arrived, where were you looking and what were you doing? We stayed right near the car crusher area, and we were waiting for the actual identification that it was Teresa's vehicle, and for them to come back and identify it as Teresa's vehicle, because at that point in time, we still were unaware if it was her vehicle or not. When law enforcement arrived, were you also watching the vehicle? Yes, we kept our eyes on the vehicle at all times. Did anybody enter the vehicle? No one entered the vehicle. Did anybody touch the vehicle that you saw? No one touched the vehicle. Miss Sturm, did you know the difference between the Manitowoc County Sheriff's deputies and the Calumet County Sheriff's deputies? Yes, they did identify themselves with their names and which department they were from. Do you know which department was the first to arrive on the scene? The first to arrive on the scene was Manitowoc County. However, they had an officer that stood near the vehicle and did not touch the vehicle. He did not really approach the vehicle. He just stood guard to make sure it was not touched until Calumet County did arrive. About how long after Manitowoc's arrival did Calumet arrive? Just a few minutes. They were right behind. After the Calumet County officers arrived, did you continue to watch the vehicle? Yes, we did. Once again, Miss Sturm, did anybody either approach, touch the vehicle, or enter the vehicle while you were there? No. No one touched the vehicle or entered the vehicle while we were there. How long were you there before you actually left that scene? We were there until like noon or 12:30-ish before we left the scene. So 2 hours or 2.5 hours. In that 2 hours that you were there, or 2.5 hours that you were there, that entire time, did you see anybody enter or touch that vehicle? No, no one entered or touched the vehicle. Miss Sturm, you mentioned that you had checked the 4 doors. What 4 doors are you talking about? The driver's side, front and passenger doors, and the actual passenger front and back. All 4 were locked? All 4 were locked. Were you asked to give either a verbal or a written statement to law enforcement that day? Yes, I gave a written statement to law enforcement. Did you tell law enforcement that you checked the doors and they were locked? Yes, and I indicated that I did use a tissue, that I didn't use my bare hands to check the doors. Mr. Kratz says, I believe that's all I have. Thank you. The court then says, Mr. Buting, and Mr. Buting, again, one of the defense attorneys for Stephen Avery, says, thank you, Your Honor, and he begins his questioning. Good morning, ma'am. Good morning. Now, you talked about when you first arrived that you began looking through some vehicles before your mom discovered this SUV. Is that right? That's correct. And in fact, before you did that, were you there when she asked permission, or did you ask permission yourself of anybody who appeared to be on the property? I wasn't there when my mom asked Earl Avery for permission to search the property. And he gave permission, right? Freely? Yes, he gave permission. Is there some reason you look at them every time you answer other than looking at me? No. Have you been told to do that by somebody from the district attorney's office? No. Did you prepare for your testimony today? No, I did not. Okay. So he gave you permission, right? Yes, he gave us permission. Did you get his name? Yes. What was it? Earl. Okay. He didn't hesitate to give you permission to check anywhere you wanted, right? No, he did not hesitate. Okay. It didn't appear as if he had anything to hide from you? No. Okay. Not to my knowledge. You said as you were going through the beginning vehicles, you were looking for either Teresa or any articles that would appear to be hers, right? Correct. So you were looking carefully inside each vehicle, not just looking at the outside of the vehicles, right? We were trying to glance into the vehicles and look anywhere that was open. Some of the trunks were open. Did you open any doors? No. You never opened up any doors of the other vehicles? No. Okay. But you were looking inside those vehicles, even though were not, obviously, not Teresa's vehicle, right? No, they didn't fit the description of Teresa's vehicle. I understand. Even though they didn't fit the description, you were looking inside those vehicles as well to see if you could see anything, right? Correct. Anything like Teresa herself, right? Her body? Correct. Or anything that would look like hers? Correct. Okay. Then when you got to the RAV4, your mom was not sure if it was the same one or not? Correct. And so you were looking inside that vehicle to see, again, if there was anything that would indicate to you any articles of Teresa's. Correct. Okay. So you were looking carefully inside there because you were trying at that point to make some determination of whether that was Teresa's vehicle, right? I was looking for things like the license plate or anything that we could look at that we had information about to be able to identify if the vehicle was hers or not. Or anything, any writing that might have her name on it, right? Yeah. Any personal effects that you could use to help you identify that vehicle was actually Teresa's, right? Correct. So it was important to look inside the vehicle, not just at the outside, right? Correct. You saw no blood whatsoever, did you? It was a dark or very dark interior. Ma'am, did you see any blood? Mr. Kratz then says, Judge, I will object as argumentative. She is trying to answer the question. If it's not yes or no, she should be able to explain. The court then says, that is a yes or no question. If the explanation is not sufficient on cross, you can ask it on redirect. Mr. Kratz says, I will do that, Judge. And then Mr. Buting continues. So yes or no? Did you see any blood? No. You didn't have a flashlight with you, you said, right? No. I said I did not have a flashlight. Yes. Nevertheless, we are talking about a Saturday morning, right? It was daylight? Correct. In fact, it was 10:30 in the morning, something like that? Correct. It was not raining? No, it was not raining. It was not terribly dark? It was a typical cloudy November day at 10:30 in the morning, right? It was a cloudy day at 10:30 in the morning. Okay. And the trees that you mentioned were around it. None of the trees had leaves on them, did they? No, but it was a very brushy area with trees versus the other flat area that we were looking at where there was nothing blocking the other vehicles. All right. Now, you knew that, in fact, your mother warned you that it was important that you not touch the vehicle, the RAV4 that you found, right? Correct. You were doing your best not to alter the scene, correct? Correct. And not only did you not want to touch the vehicle, you didn't want to touch any of the branches or debris or anything else up against it either, did you? And not with my bare hands, no. Okay. The only thing you ever touched, even with a tissue, were the door handles. Is that right? To reach one of the door handles, I did have to pull back, I believe it was a salvage part, to be able to reach the door handle. I did that with the tissue as well. All right. So did you move something that was against the vehicle itself? I just took the tissue and pulled it back so I would be able to reach the door handle. That would be the hood that was propped up against it. I would have to see the picture to identify it. Mr. Buting then says, would you put up Exhibit 30, counsel? At which time Exhibit 30 was shown on the big screen in the courtroom. And then Mr. Buting continues. I think that is it. Right there up on the screen? Yes. Okay. It was some salvage part that in order for you get at the door handle on that right rear door, you had to move that panel. I did not necessarily physically move it. I just pulled it back and checked the door and reached over. Right. Mr. Buting then says, okay, let's go to Exhibit 29, please. At which time Exhibit 29 was shown in the courtroom on the big screen. Mr. Buting then continues. Do you see Exhibit 29 up there? Yes. That is a photo of the rear of the RAV4? Yes. And there is a door handle on that door too, correct? Correct. You didn't check that one to see if it was locked, did you? No, I did not. Mr. Buting then says, and if you could go to Exhibit 33, please. Thank you. At which time Exhibit 33 was shown in the courtroom on the big screen. And Mr. Buting then continues. Thank you. That is a picture. And by the way, you are the one who took all of these pictures? That's correct. Okay. That is a picture of, it shows sort of the driver's side area of the RAV4, right? Correct. There is a sort of a walkway or walk area, I suppose, between the RAV4 and this red vehicle, whatever it is. Correct. By the way, just so we're clear, this RAV4 was found up along the ridge area of the border of the property, right? I wouldn't know whether it was the border. Okay, well, there is a single row of cars up along that area, right? Correct. And they were all sort of bumper to bumper, lined up like you would parallel park a bunch of cars along a street. Is that correct? Correct. This was the only one that was sort of double parked, where it was next to or where it was 2x2, right? I don't recall at this time if it was the only one that was double parked. Okay, but it was the only one with any kind of debris piled on it, right? Correct. It was the only one with any kind of branches piled on it. Correct? Correct. You said to us that it was obvious that it appeared that somebody was trying to conceal it. Is that correct? Correct. In that sense, then, that made it very different than any of the other vehicles, right? It made us suspicious. Yes. It made it stand out. The fact that it was because it was the only one that was covered like that, right? That and the fact that it was similar to the description of the vehicle that was Teresa's. Okay. So it was not so concealed that you couldn't tell what it was when you got near it, right? Can you rephrase that? It was not so covered up with items that when you got anywhere near it, that you were unable to determine it was even a RAV4, was it? No, I could tell it was a RAV4. Okay. So it was just sitting there for anyone to find who would be looking through the salvage area, right? If you were on foot searching, yes. Okay. Now from Exhibit 33, you said that you were trying to get the VIN number off of the vehicle, right? Correct. And the VIN number for this particular vehicle, in fact, or for most, I think, it's on the dash, kind of at the very end of the windshield, kind of down by the windshield wipers. Is that correct? That was where we were looking on this vehicle? Yes. I don't know if you knew that before, but you learned it that day. Is that correct? Yes. You were told by the officers that your mom was talking to on the phone that this is where you should direct your attention? After searching elsewhere on the vehicle? Yes. Okay. By the way, that VIN is stamped. It's in the dash in back, right there in black metal. Correct. The VIN itself is a black number, just kind of raised. Correct. Or recessed bumps, something like that, right? So to see it, you have to get pretty close, don't you? Within, eyesight, yes. In order to do that, you have to walk around to where did you walk along? From the rear? Did you approach it from the rear or did you approach it from the front? I don't recall that at this time, which way I approached the vehicle to check the VIN number. Can you get to it either way? And then there was a pause. I mean, could you come around to the front, lean over, and look from there? Or did you have to go around the rear and come up alongside of the vehicle in order to get to the front? I don't recall at this time. Okay, that's fair. Now, you said you waited around 20 minutes or so before the first officers arrived? Approximately 20 minutes. But during that time, you had retreated over near where the crusher was. Yes, correct. That is what, about 900 feet or 1,000 feet away or something like that? I can only make an approximation. I would say it would probably be by blocks, maybe 4 blocks, city blocks. Okay. Then the first to arrive were the Manitowoc officers? That's correct. And did you see a Manitowoc officer walk up toward the vehicle? Correct. More than one? I recall one officer, okay, approaching the vehicle. How many Manitowoc officers arrived first? And then there's a pause. 1 or 2? I don't recall the exact number of officers that arrived. Several? I made contact with the one officer, and I remember the other officer walked to the vehicle. Well, you were watching carefully, you said, to see what was going on, right? Correct. Were you watching because you were concerned that the police might somehow plant something in that vehicle? No. That thought never occurred to you, did it? No, of course not. So your only concern was if anybody other than police officers would come to the scene of the RAV4 and disturb it in any way, right? That was your focus? That and the focus that we needed to make sure it was her vehicle. Sure. So once the Manitowoc police officers arrived, you were put at ease a little bit, that at least some law enforcement was there, correct? I wouldn't say we were put at ease. Well, you were no longer alone at this strange auto salvage yard with other people milling about, correct? Correct. Now there was law enforcement there, right? Correct. And they had guns, right? I would assume they had their guns. So your real interest at that point was if this was really Teresa's car. That is what you were concerned about? Correct. And at some point, did one of the officers come back and tell you that? One of the Manitowoc officers? I don't recall if it was a Manitowoc officer or Calumet at that time. Okay. How long was it before the Calumet officers arrived on the scene, if you know? I can only make an approximation. I would say it was a few minutes. Okay. How many of them arrived? I don't recall the exact number of officers that arrived. Were they in marked squads or unmarked squads? I don't recall if it was unmarked or marked. Were they uniformed or not uniformed? The detective that I spoke to was an ununiformed officer. Ununiformed, did you say? Yeah. Plain clothes? Did you see any marked Calumet squads arrive there in the area of the RAV4? I don't recall if it was marked or unmarked. So you don't know whether any officers that were coming or going were Manitowoc or Calumet, right? Not unless they identified themselves. The plainclothes detective identified himself as Calumet. So the one detective identified himself, right? Yes. And the others didn't, or they did. I did not have direct contact with all of the officers who arrived at the scene. So you don't recall if they were marked cars, and you don't remember seeing any Calumet uniforms? You don't know if the officers who arrived were from Calumet or Manitowoc, right? They don't have distinguishing uniforms. They were all brown. So they were just police officers, right? Correct. But at some point, I believe, on direct, you said that you did see some. Well, let me go back and ask it this way. Did you see any Manitowoc uniformed officers at the scene? As I said, I didn't distinguish based on their uniforms. They are all brown. So at that point in time, the people that I spoke to had identified themselves as Manitowoc or Calumet, but I didn't speak with every officer that was there. When you say the people that you spoke to, it was one person that you spoke to, right? No, I spoke to both Manitowoc and Calumet County officers. You did? Correct. Maybe I am misunderstanding. I apologize. Were they wearing uniforms or plain clothes? Plain clothes detectives. So you talked to two plainclothes detectives? One said he was from Manitowoc and one said he was from Calumet? That's right. So you saw somebody that was uniformed approach the RAV4 or not? A uniformed officer did approach the RAV4. Okay. Did you ever see somebody that you could readily discern was a Calumet County officer as opposed to a Manitowoc officer come up and relieve the Manitowoc officer who was near the RAV4? I couldn't discern whether they were Manitowoc or Calumet. Okay. So you don't know if or when any Calumet officers took over responsibility for that RAV4 itself, do you? No. You said that you were there at the property, the Avery salvage property, until about noon or 12:30? That's correct. But before that time, you and your mother had sort of retreated from the car crusher area, farther north, over toward the entryway, didn't you? No, we stayed near the car crusher area. So you stayed near the car crusher when you gave your statements? Yes. And the entire time you were on that property, you were just right near the car crusher? Yes. You never went anywhere else further away to talk with officers by any other vehicles. By what vehicles? By any other vehicles or on any other area of the lot? No. You were standing next to your mother the whole time? Yes. Okay. Now, Miss Sturm, have you ever locked yourself out of your car? Yes. Did you call the police to help you get in? No. Do you know anybody else who has? No. Do you know if you needed to, if you couldn't find anyone else to get your keys, to get into your vehicle, you could call a police officer and he would help you get into your vehicle, right? I called a locksmith. Okay. But do you know you could call an officer? Many times people do call officers for that purpose. No. When it happened to me, I called the locksmith. Mr. Buting says, okay, thank you. No further questions. And the court says, Mr. Kratz. And at this point, the redirect examination is being done by Mr. Kratz. Ms. Sturm, the defense attorney had asked you about looking in the vehicle and whether you could see inside the vehicle. Do you remember those questions? Yes. Was it easy to see into those windows? No, it was not easy. I will have you take a look at Exhibit 33, although we will be looking at some others. Is there anything different about the rear windows than the front driver's windows? The rear windows had a tint to them, and as you can see from the picture here, as I'm sure other people have done, there is glare in the windows. So if you really wanted to see inside, and if you weren't concerned about not trying to disrupt the scene at all, you would have to cup your hands over the vehicle to make sure you were blocking out the glare and the shadows, which we didn't do. You did not do? No. I will show you exhibit number 30 and ask you to describe the tint on the back windows. The rear and back windows were darkly tinted. The front windshield and the driver's and passenger's doors were not. So once again, you can see there is definitely a glare. Ms. Sturm, whether the officers were Calumet County or Manitowoc County, did any officer approach that vehicle? No officer touched the vehicle while we were present. That's actually not what he asked. He asked if any officer approached the vehicle, not whether or not they touched it. Anyway, let's go on. Did you see any officer pull out a device or try to pry open the door or anything like that while you were there? No. If that would have happened, would you have seen it? Yes, definitely. Mr. Kratz then says, okay, that's all I have of Ms. Sturm. And Mr. Buting says nothing further. And the court says, very well, you are excused. All right. So, Nikole's testimony was pretty short, but there's some stuff that just doesn't make sense to me. If you believe both Nikole and her mom, who testified in the episode just before this, for a full 2.5 hours, they stood there waiting for deputies to arrive, which only took a few minutes. I think they said 20 minutes. And then once they did arrive, they gave them both oral and written statements to these same deputies, and they never, ever took their eyes off the vehicle. Ever. Not even when the Manitowoc deputies showed up. Not even when the Calumet deputies showed up and they rolled in just a few minutes later. That's pretty effing impressive. And I'd love to know how to write on a form while I'm looking someplace else. Do they really expect us to believe that? And did you catch how Nikole said the first to arrive was Manitowoc, the same department that Stephen Avery is suing for $36 million, but they're just there to stand guard until Calumet County shows up? Why did they need to be there at all if Calumet is the one in charge of the investigation? She even said that Manitowoc showed up first, but, Calumet was like hot on their heels. I don't think this is one of those quote unquote absolutely necessary moments that Manitowoc County had to be there at all. And I love when she says the deputy didn't really approach the vehicle. What the hell does really mean? Either he did or he didn't. And when the defense tries to clear things up by asking who it was that showed up first, which department, every answer that she gave just made it even more confusing. And don't even get me started on the glare on the windows. It's 10:30 in the morning on a cloudy day. If you see glare on one side, don't you walk around to the other side? I would. Wouldn't you? The bottom line is that Teresa's car was found that day. It was found fast as hell. Was it a setup? What do you think? It's at this point that I usually add in information from Kathleen Zellner's documents, and there's really not a whole lot when it comes to just Nikole herself. This is what's mentioned in the 2017 motion for post-conviction relief. Trial defense counsel referenced Pam's testimony that she and her daughter, Nikole Sturm, did not know with certainty that the rear cargo door of the RAV4 was locked, and trial defense counsel claimed that a police officer would know how to open a locked car. Trial defense counsel also stated that it is not entirely clear that Miss Halbach's vehicle was locked when it arrived at the WSCL. Trial defense counsel asserted that it would only require someone to open two of the vehicle's doors to plant all the evidence. And that's about all we have for Zellner's documents, at least regarding Nikole Sturm. Next up on the stand is Bobby Dassey, and you might recognize the last name. He was right there on the property. He's Stephen Avery's nephew, and he lived just yards from where Teresa was last seen. For reference or future reference, he is Barb Janda's son, and Brendan Dassey is his younger brother. So Bobby is the older brother to Brendan. So yeah, there's a lot at stake here with this testimony. We'll see what Bobby has to say about what he saw that day in the next episode. This is about to take a turn. And if you're still here and listening, damn, you are my kind of person. If you feel like tossing a buck or two my way for research, storytelling, or just, emotional damage control, head to ko-fi.com/beachhouse34. One-time tip, no strings, all love. Thank you, and we'll talk soon. Bye for now.